Well, welcome to C3 Church Carlingford Online. My name is Richard Botter, and along with my wife Sue, we are the senior pastors of C3 Church Carlingford and Wentworthville, and we are just thrilled to have you here with us as we embark on a series based in the sense of the vision that we have as a church. Over the course of this year, we are really focusing on this sense of vision, the lens, if you will, that we want to do ministry through. More people, more like Jesus, together, transforming our communities. And over the course of the year, we're going to take some time in talking through, understanding and exploring that sense of vision. In each of the school terms of the year, we're going to focus on one of each of the four statements, the first being more people, the second being more like Jesus, the third being together, and the fourth being transforming our communities. And so today we're going to start a series on what does it look like to be more people. Now, there's so many different ways that you can conceive of that and think about that and how that will play out in your mind. But I need to say, for me, it starts with the whole frame of evangelism. I love hearing stories of people coming to Jesus. Whether it's the story of Zacchaeus in Luke chapter 19, where we read of this guy who was an outcast in the society, really, a tax collector. But Jesus embraces him. Jesus has this more people attitude. I can include another person into my world. I want to include another person in my world, and that person's you today, Zacchaeus. I love that approach. Or whether it's the story of faith where some new members at the church have, come to faith, them and the whole family, Peter and Sarah Nimran, and they're just inspiring stories as people choose to follow Jesus. More people is the beginning of our sense of vision, and it starts with evangelism. More people coming to faith in Jesus. I love the great commandments that Jesus gave us in Matthew chapter 22, verses 37 to 39. We read these words in Matthew's gospel. Jesus said to him, somebody had asked a great question, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." Here is the bedrock of what more people is all about. Love your neighbor as yourself. That ability to embrace more people in our world. Our culture right now is telling us to exclude and to cancel and to isolate from people. But the gospel is so countercultural. It says include. It says bring people in to your orbit. Go into their orbit and be with them. Don't cancel, don't exclude, don't isolate. Find a way where you can bring yourself into the orbit of others to love them with the love that Jesus has loved you with. More people is about opening up our relationships and us living in such a manner that God's character is displayed through the particulars of everyday life. The large and little moments that we get to do with people, and they experience God in us. The word neighbor has roots in both Greek and in Latin, and it literally means to draw near. I love that. Love your neighbor as yourself. Draw near to someone. Draw near. That's about getting close, not isolating. It's about inclusion. To be a neighbor means to have the capacity to draw near to others. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, the Apostle Paul gives clues about how to draw near. It is a phenomenal chapter of the Bible, and I'm going to kind of touch through different scriptures of it today, but I really encourage you, as homework after you've listened to me, to read through 1 Corinthians 9. Paul is becoming a neighbor of people in the port town of Corinth, and we learn some of his principles about drawing near to people. And I tell you, they're really helpful. The first one I read as I read through 1 Corinthians chapter 9 is that Paul Paul is somebody who abandoned his rights. And that's what good neighbours do. Good neighbours abandon their rights. Now, first, if you're going to be a good neighbour, you need to really want to have motivating in you this sense of that call from Christ when you enter glory. Well done, good and faithful servant. If that's a driving force for you being a great neighbour, let me assure you, you're going to find yourself in great company. Each one of us have been given opportunities and gifts and ministries to show Christ in all his glory and predominantly his love to those who surround us. You don't have to go to the beach or to the mountains. You don't have to do those things if you don't want to go and find a neighbour. You can simply do it in your backyard. But you could go to the beach or to the mountains or somewhere, wherever, not a problem. Nobody's going to argue with that. But if we're going to be good neighbours in the lives of the people that we're doing life with, we're going to need to commit to some things. And if we're going to mix it up with people and be good neighbours, we have to be like Jesus. And that's keep this sense of being a good neighbour as a top priority. Paul begins here in 1 Corinthians 9 by raising a conversation about rights. In verse 4, he says, don't we have the right to food and drink? Of course you do. Don't we have the right to a wife? Yes, husbands have the right to a wife. Yes. Don't we have the right to financial support? Sure. But Paul says in verse 12, but we do not use this right. On the contrary, we put up with anything rather than hinder the gospel of Christ. It's an interesting place, isn't it? Good neighbours abandon their rights. Paul says, I haven't used any of these rights. In verse 18, the issue of rights comes up again. And the answer to every one of these rhetorical questions Paul asks is that we have these rights, but we're about Jesus' priorities. And we have to be willing to say, I'll set aside some of those rights. To be a good neighbour, one of the sacrifices you will have to do at some point in time or another is to limit your social calendar. You know, going out with that friend and that friend and that friend, because what happens, the longer you live as a Christian is your circle of friends includes more and more Christians and less people who don't yet know Jesus. And one of the ways you abandon your rights as a Christian is to say, you know what, I've got a wonderful cohort of Christian friends. Absolutely, you need Christian friends, 100%. But you really need some people who don't yet know Jesus that are really clearly, intimately in your world. That's really, really important. Over the years, Sue and I have made a commitment that we were going to ensure we had friends who don't have a faith context, don't go to our church or to any church. Why? Because we wanted to make sure that we kept that edge of inviting people into our world to be around more people so that we can include them into a conversation about Christ. We've tried to keep that focus at work within our lives so that people would experience God's transforming love through us. If you're going to be a great neighbour, there's going to be some rights that you're going to give up. And maybe it's that social calendar right of being with your friends all the time who are all Christians. Maybe you need to give up some of that time with those people to invest with the high priority, the first priority of Christ, of being with those who don't know Christ. Not only is there an abandonment of rights, however, there's also an acceptance of responsibility. One of the keys to becoming a good neighbour is to recognise and accept before God that you are a neighbour. God is really unlikely to ship into your neighbourhood a missionary from Japan or India or South America or Central America or Tanzania or anywhere. You're it. You're the missionary to those within your street, within your neighborhood, within your workplace, within your university classes and tutorials, within your school, wherever it is that God has already positioned you. Remembering in Matthew 28 that Great Commission is in your going, in the midst of life, make disciples. You don't have to go somewhere else to make a disciple. In the midst of life. But that's about accepting responsibility that God has positioned you already. And now we are to shine the light of Christ where we are. We have the privilege of being the bearer of the best message that any individual will ever hear in their life. And it's not just transforming for time, but for eternity as well. Jesus is the good news, and you are the messenger. In fact, to a large degree, you are the message even. Yes, we are, Christ within us is the message, but as a result, we are the message. We're described as a shining star, a fragrant aroma, a living letter for every person to read. Evangelism is allowing those who don't know Jesus to turn the pages of the book of our lives, read the fine print, hear the music of the gospel. Opening up our homes, including people in our social events, street parties, Christmas parties, going fishing or to the beach with a friend. In these settings, people get to observe us. They get close to us. They experience Christ. And they know we're not perfect. Don't ever let the enemy tell you this lie, oh, you're not good enough. Well, nobody will ever be good enough. Just be yourself. Let Christ shine through the cracks of your life. Where 2 or 3 are gathered together, someone's going to spill some milk. It's our brokenness and failure that are often the most effective and powerful frames of evangelism for us. The Bible does not say that we need to be perfect, because Christ is the one who's perfect. It says we should let our progress be known to all, not our perfection known to all. Progress implies that you haven't yet arrived. Our neighbours want to see a sense of authenticity, somebody who's real, somebody whose progress is moving in a positive direction. Whether that neighbour's in your workplace that you sit in the cubicle next to, and they overhear you receive a phone call from a spouse or a child or a parent which didn't go well as you'd like, and they overhear it, but they heard the grace in your voice. They hear the tone of love. And they think to themselves, wow, there's something different about John. They want to see that. And we need to accept that sense of responsibility, that we are positioned where God has called us amongst those people. And good neighbours don't only accept that sense of responsibility, but good neighbours also adopt a servant's role. As you read through 1 Corinthians 9, there's this principle which revolutionises our sense of witness, our sense of evangelism, so that we can embrace more people. Verse 19 says, though I'm free, I belong to no man. I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. Wow. I'm completely free. I'm a slave to no one. I don't belong to anyone. But I will make myself the slave of another, the servant of another, but with a purpose, to win as many as possible. Good neighbours adopt a servant's role, a servant's posture. While I'm my own man, I voluntarily make myself a servant to others. Why? To win as many as possible. There's a direct correlation, I think, between my effectiveness in evangelism and my ability to serve. We're good neighbours by serving. Now that is profoundly countercultural. None of us are servants by nature. God tells us clearly in John 13, you're a towel wearer, you're a basin bearer. There are those who will be on God's best dressed list. People who are towel bearers, people who are basin bearers. Napoleon said a man becomes the man of his uniform. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to wear anything from Gucci. Just grab from Kmart a towel to serve. And you'll find you're in the kind of uniform you need to really bring the gospel to others. You know, evangelism is a process. There's that first phase of cultivation where we're busting up the weeds and breaking up the soil, and we're cultivating the heart by building relationship. Some of us will never lead a load of people to Christ, but don't let anybody put some guilt trip on you because you're not leading loads of people to Jesus. But don't go to the other extreme either and check yourself out of evangelism. I'd like $1 for every meal our church has prepared for families in our community where a child is sick or hospitalized, or a mother is, or a father's away on a long trip of one sort or another. We don't tape the 4 Spiritual Laws booklet to the trays of food that we send out. No way. But we take that food to people. And it's incredible how God uses it. Hamper after hamper goes out from our church. Meal after meal goes out from our church. And that's that sense of cultivating the heart, softening the heart of people. And of course, you've got to sow the gospel as well. Some of us are good at sowing. Some of us aren't as good at sowing. Sowing is that sense of proclamation where we tell the gospel. We're planting seeds. We're praying for people. We're having conversations. We're planting seeds. We're planting seeds. And reaping is that final phase. And recognize you may be better at the cultivation, or better at the sowing, or better at the reaping. Not all of us are good at all three. Most of us are good at one more than the others. But reaping is that final phase. In the reaping phase, we're looking for a response. That this is about the will of the person at that time. God has gifted certain people in the area of reaping. We tend to make evangelism equal reaping. And so for many of us, we go, because I haven't actually led somebody to the Lord in the last 12 months or 6 months or whatever, I'm not doing well in evangelism. But you've been sowing seed everywhere. You've been proclaiming to people. You've been helping people understand what the gospel really is. Or you've been cultivating the soil by bringing meals and serving in that frame. And if you measure yourself just on the reap, you may not be doing as well as you'd like. But you know what? That's not the place where you're meant to be focused alone. God's gifted certain people in the area of reaping. We tend to make evangelism equal reaping. So we can feel guilty and check ourselves out of evangelism, but don't do that. The Bible is clear. Some sow, some cultivate, some water, and God's the one who grants the increase anyway. So play your part in the evangelism frame. In that, what's your part as the servant? Are you more at cultivation, more at sowing, more at reaping? Where do you get to serve? And redemptive people, those gospel-oriented people, those good neighbors, they adapt to the context. As you read through 1 Corinthians chapter 9, I want you to watch out for the word become. How often it occurs as Paul writes to the Corinthians. Ask yourself why. Paul says to win the Jew, he became like a Jew. To win those under the law, he became like one under the law. To win those outside of the Jewish law, he became like one who's living outside the Jewish law. To win the weak, he became weak. What's the secret? The secret is to do things for their reasons, for other people's reasons, not yours. The secret is more important than the information you communicate, I might add. It's the identity that you assume, not the words that you say. Now, if you go into a friend's house somewhere maybe down the street, maybe you're visiting somebody from work for the first time in your life, been invited into their home and you've gone, great, I'm going to turn up, no problem. There's Barbies on at their place. Fantastic. It's a Sunday afternoon. You've turned up, you've taken a six-pack of beer with you or a bottle of wine or something, and they know you're a Christian and you all the rest of it, and you've turned up. There's a whole bunch of others from work and the barbecue's on. You put your meat on the pile and you brought the salad, you put it on the table, all of those kinds of things. But as you walked in, you saw this wall, and it's got car photo after car photo, car photo after car photo, car photo, and you realise there's the Datsun 120Y, their first car, that Matchbox car kind of thing that really was like, if you got a can opener, you could have taken the panels off it, but then you watch this development from the 120Y through to the next car and the next car and the next car, and then you see the WRX Subaru in there, and then after that you see a Mustang, and you kind of notice that as you drove up, that Mustang's in the drive and it's immaculate. It's beautiful, it's polished, and it's like, whoa, that thing is like, guess what? You've got a context to become. That's what you want to pay attention to as you walk into their house. Because if they've got a wall full of photos of cars somewhere and you don't know what to talk about, let me help you. You've got a problem. Because it's staring at you. If you want to win a car enthusiast, talk about cars. If you want to win somebody who's into horse racing, talk about horse racing. If you want to talk to somebody about cycling because they're into cycling, talk about cycling. Don't talk about your pet love. Talk about their pet love. And you will find doors of opportunity open. So critical. Paul became like a Jew or somebody not under the law or weak or whatever. He became like them. Take an interest in their world. You may just find that they'll take an interest in your world and commit their life to Christ because you've walked into their world and engaged them. And you know what? If they're a God seeker, they're going to turn that around and start asking you some questions. God can do that. You can do that. God has called you and me to go wherever the lost sheep are. Remember, more people. We've got the 99 in the barn. Follow the lost one. Get the lost one. Bring the more people, the lost one in. Jesus was accused of a number of things by the Pharisees in Luke chapter 7. He says this, John came not eating and drinking, and you guys said he was demon-possessed. I came eating and drinking, and you say I'm a drunken and a glutton. You say I'm a friend of sinners. Well, only the last of those three accusations of Jesus was true. He wasn't a glutton, he wasn't a drunkard, but he certainly was a friend of sinners. And when we think of more people, I want you to think of more people you can bring into your orbit who don't yet know Jesus. Be a friend of sinners. Be a friend of sinners. Be a good neighbour by being a friend of sinners. And we'll see more people in God's kingdom. Well, I want to thank you for being here with us today. There's a couple of things I want to mention before I finish up. Firstly, it's this. If you have been online with us a little bit and you feel like, you know what? I want to know more about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. I'd really love it if you could simply write to me at guest@c3carlingford.org.au or scan the QR code that's coming up on the screen, and it'll take you to a secure web page, and you can just let us know that you want some more information about what it means to follow Jesus. If you've been with us for a few weeks and you go, I just want to get better connected, same thing. Scan that QR code, write to us at guest@c3carlingford.org.au, and we'd love to get in contact with you. If you need prayer for something, simply write to us at prayer@c3carlingford.org.au as well. There's one other thing that I want you to do. We're in our Vision Month. And there's just a short clip of some of the things that we're doing over Vision Month that I'd love you to engage with, because we really want you to feel part of our larger church community. And so if you pay attention to this will give you a little bit more of the information of what's going on around our church at this time. Otherwise, God bless you, and we'll see you in church next Sunday.
Can you believe it? It's week 2 of our Vision Month, and I know I felt reinvigorated joining in the church fast and praying throughout this last week.
Well, Tim, there's still plenty of time to pray with the saints because we've got our Vision Month prayer gatherings. This week, we'll be at our C3 Wentworthville location at Toongabbie East Public School, or join in via Zoom. The Zoom details will be in the weekly email. But don't miss this amazing opportunity to gather and pray with the whole church.
If you're a member of our church, there is an envelope up the back with your name on it, containing access to this year's Vision Book, a church calendar, and the Vision Builders Commitment Card.
Lastly, I hope you've been praying about how God is calling you to sacrificially give into the Vision Builders offering for 2025. My husband Nick and I have been praying and seeking God for how we are to participate in this offering. Come ready to pledge on Sunday, 2nd of March.
And that's all for Vision Month News this week.